1920s America. The second industrial revolution was booming as the old industries of steel and railroads gave way to rampant personal consumerism. Trickle-down economic theory reigned as protective tariffs were implemented, taxes dramatically lowered, and reforms achieved during the Progressive Era were pushed aside for new policies which favored a free market. All of this would soon culminate in the fall of 1929 with the worst economic catastrophe in United States history. On October 29th, or Black Tuesday, the U.S. stock market collapsed as stock prices dropped, causing traders to sell shares in a frenzy. This sharp collapse soon reached banks. Americans rushed to withdraw their savings from failing banks, and with the crash of the stock market and then the banking system, the rest of the U.S. economy felt the massive hit. Unemployment hit an astounding 25% as companies were forced to lay off workers. Children given up by desperate parents traversed the nation alone. Suicide, malnutrition, disease, foreclosures, and layoffs plagued the nation. After 3 consecutive Republican presidents and a turn towards social conservatism following the Progressive Era, the nation was left with little reprieve, and President Herbert Hoover proved to only achieve meek policy reforms. Hoover echoed conservatives of the past in that private enterprise alone could ease the burden on the American people, and only begrudgingly passed federal reforms after sustained pressure from Congress. Enter Franklin Delano Roosevelt. A proven bureaucrat, he was elected governor of New York in 1928, where he began his policy reform at the state level. After over a decade of unfettered capitalism, Americans were ready for a change and elected FDR over Hoover in a landslide victory in 1932. Sweeping support from the working class and even a large portion of the middle class, combined with the sheer devastation of economic catastrophe, gave way to a public largely receptive to bold national policy reform, and FDR delivered in the form of complete legislative package called the New Deal. The New Deal was a sweeping series of reforms, regulations, programs that spanned from 1932 up until the Second World War. In the first 100 days of 1933, the Roosevelt administration created a secondary federal budget for emergency spending while balancing the regular budget with the Economy Act, securing the funding for the following reforms. The Emergency Banking Act consolidated over 4,000 small banks into several large entities and reopened 3/4 of them in 3 days after the passage of the law. Prohibition was repealed with the 21st Amendment, which brought revenue and morale back to states and localities. The Public Works Administration provided funding for infrastructure improvements like bridges, schools, roads, and dams, as well as employing those who were still without jobs. A series of programs targeting rural areas followed, which aimed to spur more public works, employ citizens, and preserve American agriculture. The Second New Deal brought one of the most significant reforms in American history. The Social Security Act in 1935. It established retirement pensions, unemployment insurance, and welfare benefits for children and people with disabilities. Then came labor reforms, which set the maximum number of work hours at 44 hours per week and prohibited labor for children younger than 16. FDR swept yet another election in 1936, but a short recession in 1937 ended his unfettered popularity and led to the public to become wary of a strong federal government. However, the onset of World War II brought American industry booming back. Both personal income and the federal budget soared during wartime. In 1945, President Roosevelt died and was preceded by Harry Truman. FDR's legacy as the great reformer lives on to this day in the precedents he set for policy change in the reluctant welfare state.